So this is the mandatory annual safety meeting. We're about to start our season. This slide, I always put this up first. This is for the benefit of those of you who are watching this on video later on, especially if you're a new member. You can pause right now, write down this information, the things in the yellow box, put those down, send an email to Tim Moran and tell him you've watched this video.
Wait, go back.
Go back.
All right, new members, yeah, send that all to Tim and we'll get you...
Hold on. Let me take a picture now.
Oh, wow, I didn't know there'd be demand for this. I was going to slow through this. Now I'm 15, 20 seconds behind schedule. Okay, done? Anybody else? No? One more photo? That's the end of the photos. So this is a mandatory safety meeting, and there's also, I'll get to it later, the mandatory annual safety survey. I'll give you the results of the 2023 safety survey. This counts as fast wings credit. We'll get to that. Currency requirements review, radio review, club rules, a little briefing on Skyline skydive. Thing about the traffic pattern, that was very interesting. And helicopter downwash, which is also very interesting. I had that in there because I learned a lot about helicopter downwash this year, which really surprised me. And it turned out it was good that I had that in there because you'll see. John's going to come up and do the rope break presentation, and then Pete's going to come up. Allison was scheduled to. She's not feeling well. She's not here. It was going to be a very long meeting anyway, so Allison will put her information in the newsletter. Mr. Keller, she's going to write to you if you don't mind putting that in there. That would be good. So I want to point out, we'll get to that slide at the end as a reminder. Again, if you're viewing online, contact Tim. Why are you here? It's because of 1-7-6 in the ops manual requires the safety officer develop at least one mandatory meeting. If you'd like more, lobby me, and if we could take a vote, we could have 2 of these every year. But 1 is required. Also have to conduct an annual audit, and we did that. And John Noss has found a need to analyze the land-out options at Front Royal. He's done a marvelous job. He's going to take up probably the half of this presentation. This does count for wings credit. I am it works that way because I'm a representative of the FAA safety team, and I'm supposed to identify hazards and unsafe conditions as one of my jobs. Also, the FAA has the compliance program. I say new. How long has that been in? Pete, how long is the compliance program?
15 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
15 years. Well, to me that's new. For the first 35 years I flew, that if you did something wrong, they would pull your certificate, suspend it or do something. Now they have this compliance program. So if something comes up, they have CFIs who are fast team reps can administer some extra training and sign the person off. They don't lose their certificate. And I'm one of those for gliders in this region. And also encourage pilots to use wings. This does count as wings credit. You need 3 wings credits to get your ground portion of your flight review. If your flight review comes due this year, the one last year, and the one this year, that's 2 of them. You only need 1 more credit, and you've got the ground portion of your flight review all set up. The bottom note, be sure to note this. If what you use for the club, if your email for the club membership is not the same as your wings, be sure to put it over there on the sheet or you won't get credit. I'm only going to give credit to those people who do that. If you're listening to this as a new member, you can email to me, or I guess Tim will, and I'll get you credit. I can give credit all year for this once you've watched it on video. So a lot of this is just review. I think these are all really good things to do every year. Your currency requirements. You probably have a lot of people who don't meet the currency requirements now. You have to make, this is true all year long, 3 takeoffs and landings in a glider to fly a club glider within the past 90 days. The second part in red, if you've not done that, you must fly once with a club instructor. If the club instructor signs you off, then you could get your next 2 to fly passengers on your own. And it will be called a spring check. It will show up in your SPR, less than 9A proficiency or stage check.
Did we go back?
Excuse me?
We changed the ops manual, we took out that field of, like, the field of operations, we took that out.
Okay, I'll copy that for next year's meeting, so that's not quite exactly the same. Especially for new members, a reminder for everybody that the radio is required for every flight. Not really required for gliders or at this airport, but it's a club rule, and so that is controlling. We do have to have that.
A working
So always do a radio check, and it's required before every takeoff for this club. We all have ADS-B out in all of the club gliders now. I think, do both tow planes have it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, all of our aircraft have ADS-B out.
So make sure you turn it.
This is an important one. Be sure that your transponder is set to the alt position. And also we have two of our gliders have a separate switch. I know 9 Yankee has a switch that says ADS-B. And it's possible you turn on the transponder all the way up, it's not working. If there's an ADS-B switch, and 21 Kilo also has a separate transponder switch. So you have to flip that switch and turn the transponder to alt. Reminder about cross-country flights. You might think you're going somewhere as a cross-country flight. It is not. A cross-country flight is defined as any flight. Does this little thing work? Go pointer work? Any flight that requires atmospheric lift to return to the traffic pattern is a cross-country flight. So you just run out on the ridge, which I think that's the next slide. It's not limited to thermals. Flying on the ridge can easily put you out of final glide, and it's a cross-country. There's some rules about that. You have to comply with those rules. To help you with that, all of the cockpits now, except for Fox Whiskey, anyway, for all practical purposes, they all have a RAM mount. CU Navigator is fairly cheap. It works on everything. It works on iPhones, Android devices, iPads, and of course UDIs. I highly recommend you getting that. Will help you determine whether you're within final glide of the airport.
What was the name of it?
CU.
CU Navigator. SEE YOU, 16-letter word, CU Navigator by Navitur. You put that on your phone, put that on a RAM mount. If you set it up properly, it will automatically guide you back to the airport, giving you your final glide safety margin back to the airport. It's very comfortable to have. We have the RAM mounts in all of them. Bring your own device, any iOS or Android smartphone or tablet, or of course an UDI or So the next topic is we do have a skydive operation. This is their third season. Albert and Julie run it. I think they're very safety conscious, cooperative, easy to work with. I've been very pleased with them. They operate Thursday through Monday. This is really a good one.
Wait,
if you have any questions, excuse me? What is it?
Oh, okay, so long weekend. I was just,
What was your question?
I was saying Thursday through Monday, yeah.
Okay,
Clears the
they
weekends.
do operate Thursday through
Right.
Mondays.
Yeah.
Most people don't notice that because we fly Saturday and Sunday. We
Right.
could come out for an ad hoc day on those days. That is their operating hours.
Okay.
If you have any questions or concern when you are here, don't stand on the ramp and badmouth them. Oh, those awful people. Go inside. They're not awful people. They're wonderful people. Go in and talk to them. And also a reminder, you're there, duty officers especially. If the duty officer forgets, everybody please go in and get them. Get them and their jump pilot. Bring two of them out for the safety meeting. They like to participate. They gave me these reminders. When it's possible, if you see them like this, loading up, and you are thinking about pushing the glider out and they're about ready to go, if you could give them an extra couple minutes just to push to taxi past us, that's a nice thing. They understand it doesn't take that long to taxi around by the fuel farm. It's just a friendly, neighborly thing. This is a little more important. Avoid taxiing and towing gliders beside the landing zone when the jumpers are under canopy, once they're up there coming down. And what is the landing zone? They gave me pictures for that. This is there's the landing zone right there. I don't know why they gave me that picture, but anyway, they land right there. But they have a right-hand pattern and a left-hand pattern depending on the wind. So So if you're new
Big
to the
one they
club,
asked me was to
watch
keep
the-
man killer tow planes from taxiing.
okay, somebody had a statement?
They talked to me one day and said they really appreciate when the tow pilots, if they're down like, 400 feet, within 30 seconds of landing, that the tow planes really keep the man killers down at the hangar until they land.
Yes, that's much, and us towing too. If you're towing a glider back, just stop and let them land. I've only seen once where they had a bad situation where they got blown over to here. That does happen, and if that were to happen and you were there, they could get dragged across your glider or especially into a prop. It doesn't happen very often, but just be aware and you take a few seconds to do this. This was one of the most interesting things I did this year. So AOPA has something called the Airport Support Network. It's for the whole country, and they try to have a rep at every airport. And I am the rep for Front Royal. And we've had a problem with airplanes flying right pattern. Anybody had that problem? I'm sure you've seen that. And you go up and talk to them, they go, well, I read that it's the right pattern. Where did you get that? I get upset because I look in the AFD. And the AFD specifically says it the right way. Where'd you get that? I read that somewhere. I found where they read it. None other than ForeFlight. Now I read that and see what you think. If you were at Leesburg or someplace nearby, you've never been to Front Royal, and you opened up your ForeFlight, and it's going to be very small. You're going to see it kind of like that because you're on your phone, and you're getting ready to climb in your airplane, or maybe you're already in your airplane and you're flying to Front Royal and you pull out your phone to see what it is. And that's what it says. Runway 10 right traffic pattern, runway 10 right traffic gyrocopters, runway 28 right pattern. Their excuse when we talked to ForeFlight was just, this is for like a lawyer and an English major. Do you see the colon right there?
So this is an
It's like a
exception.
top. What's the rule? Where is runway 28 right traffic pattern, colon? Well, runway 28 right pattern is for those three things. But nobody sees the colon. And the difference between a colon and a semicolon changes everything. But they thought that was okay. So luckily, the Airport Support Network is run by an AOPA employee, Sean Collins. Sean got to ForeFlight. We got this changed, and this is what it says now.
Not the
Runway 28
semicolon.
colon, left traffic, right traffic. So that's what's in ForeFlight now. So I don't think we'll have that problem anymore. I couldn't understand how we kept having that problem.
For the airplanes that don't have a radio, and they don't have an iPad, and they don't have ForeFlight, it's an uncontrolled field. Technically, there's nothing to keep them from landing on 1-0, even though on the Unicom everybody's saying we're landing 2-8.
There isn't,
Always see and avoid. That's the only thing I can
always
say.
see and avoid, that's
Always
true,
see
and this isn't going to end it, but it's going to cut down on it because there have been people who've come in and just read in ForeFlight. They're being diligent, they were trying to be good, they're good people, they wanted to know what to do, and they read ForeFlight, and ForeFlight was misleading to them. So yeah, what Eric says is true, they can land either direction, it's still in the AFD.
But the chart supplement was correct, right?
It always has been.
Yeah, so
But people don't look at that.
But you're supposed to use the government-produced documents.
Well, the other
People with
problem, Shane,
ForeFlight,
is-
they're flying VFR on a Saturday, they're not going to go look at the chart supplement. They just open ForeFlight, and ForeFlight is misleading. So that's been fixed. Yay. So the helicopters, this is my only new topic. I learned a lot about helicopter downwash earlier this year. The FAA does talk about it, but it's kind of like wingtip vortices. I think in the next year or two, you're going to see a lot of information. Pete, you may know more about this. I've gotten the idea that the FAA is realizing, people are crashing and dying because of helicopters, and it's becoming an emphasis item. I think, how can I play this? If I hit this again, is it going to play?
Give it a whirl.
Nope. We've got to figure out how to play that.
Try spacebar.
We did this.
Bottom.
Oh, yeah. The bottom. Go to the bottom.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Touch the camera at the bottom. Right here. Can you click? Where's your mouse?
There it is.
There it
It's on your screen.
Oh, you click?
Left.
Okay, you click that? It's only 30 seconds, but right. Good right.
I'm looking back
Right
at you.
there. Click.
Okay, there we go.
We're all feeling it.
Well,
Look at it, you weren't right in the center.
That's so weird because we played this. Can you narrate it for us, Ron?
It's only good for one play.
Apparently, someone or another.
Oh, that was taking a
You
picture.
seen it? That's so funny. In rehearsals, it went fine.
Is there a play button on the left?
No, the next one just go. I think hit this little play button right down there on the bottom. I think the first click makes it play. Nope, not this time. It did.
How about the space bar? Does space bar do it?
Yeah, hit the space bar. Go back and hit the space bar. Just hit the space bar. Go back. Now just hit the space bar. Nope.
Oh,
Nope.
You have to come out of PowerPoint.
that's the point. If you come out of PowerPoint
If
and
you
then
go
try to do
online
it.
and Google helicopter and glider accident, it shows
No,
up
this
on
is
the-
if you go on YouTube and type in Cessna 120 helicopter, it will show you this. A helicopter comes flying through here. He's going to land down there, and the helicopter flies through. There is the picture. You see that? That's a Cessna 120, and that's the helicopter. So the helicopter flew through. The Cessna 120 flies down to this point and just flips over, knife edge, 90 degrees, comes down wingtip first, smashes down the nose, flips over, and slides clear off the...
Was he taking off or landing?
He's landing. He was landing. Richard?
Well, there was, I think it was John sent out that link to the video earlier last year and suggested that everybody watch it. Did you send it out, John? It was
I don't
sent
remember it.
out
Yeah,
in
the link's
email.
not in the,
Yeah, it's Cessna 120, but the point is, it just flipped over. Now, I included this one because this guy survived. He was injured to some extent, but I don't think he was seriously injured. And when you see it, you think, oh, you just watched a guy die right there. Because that wing touches, the nose slams down, it flips over and slides backwards over and into the hangars. He was survived it, so I used that one. There are numerous of these online if you want to look at them. People do not survive. They're flying along, they come in and they're just, everything looks perfect, and everything's perfect, and 2 seconds later they're dead. They just flip over and they land and they smash on the canopy upside down. Helicopter rotor wash.
I had an experience like that with a Black Hawk.
And John, say what your thing.
Yeah, I saw a heavy lift helicopter blow a truck over. They cut me off first.
Yeah, so they're very dangerous. They will flip an airplane, and the aim, this is about all it says, that pilots of small aircraft should avoid operating within the 3 rotor diameters of a helicopter in a slow hover or taxi or stationary hover. They do fortunately just say, think about a half a football field. We have the MedStar helicopters. Many times you see them come in and they come right over the place where we launch. They fly down the runway and they land. Think about allowing 2 or 3 minutes. If you'd seen that video, it would have been so dramatic. Yes, Jim?
This is a note that went out to the instructors. There's a really good article on this, including the video, from the National Association of Flight Instructors, the NAFI website.
NAFI, okay.
So if you go to NAFI and just look for it, it's, not only does it have that video, it has a couple of others, including a non-fatal one and a fatal one, and also has a good discussion of it.
Yeah, there's going to be more and more discussion because it's just amazing how many people are being injured and killed because of that. And think about letting them land and just giving it 2 or 3 minutes.
so if they're running outside of their hangar like they do, warm up, can we take off?
That's okay. It's when they break ground, when they're in a hover. now they're generating a wash.
That's
And they're sitting there on the
Just
ground,
tax rate
pitch is
station,
almost
okay.
zero, so not really putting anything out.
Gotcha.
It's when they start fighting the wind.
Okay.
But they fly right over, you can see them, you're sitting there getting ready, and the helicopter flies right over and goes down there and lands. And they've come over our area, give them a couple minutes. So then, after having this in here, I got a little more dramatic demonstration of the helicopter downwash damage than I expected. During the wave camp last week, a large departing helicopter wreaked havoc on the ramp, moved a bunch of gliders around. Everybody just finished flying. The ramp was covered with gliders. People were holding down gliders all over the ramp. There were, some people here would know, 4 or 5, I guess, of club members were holding down Foxtrot Whiskey with its canopy closed, and one was standing there. You know, the canopy would open away. They were standing there holding the canopy down. The force, but it wasn't latched. The rotor wash just ripped the canopy open, flipped it back, and the entire perimeter attachment was cracked and it's grounded. You've heard it's going to be about 3 months. So at the camp, we found that there's one of the, we had members from numerous other clubs. One of them said it's just their normal policy to close a canopy and they latch. They reach in. You've got your hand inside anyway, you're lowering it down with your hand on that thing, just put it forward and latch it. We talked about this in the ops manual. I don't think the board's going to put this in the ops manual. This is something, I hope not, because we don't want to start getting people in trouble for not latching a canopy. This club's been around 34 years. This is the first time this has happened, and it only happened because a big helicopter flew over. But it's a good idea to latch it anyway. It's not a big deal. Just going to get into a habit pattern. So I'm trying to encourage that. This is the picture of the damage, and that doesn't look like much, but that's kind of all the way around the canopy. There's a couple of places that look like that. Most of it just looks like that. It just busted the whole thing loose.
Is the canopy broken? No.
Yes, and there are places where the canopy itself is broken. Most of it's the attachment points, and I didn't get a clear picture of that, but there is a place where it just like right across one of these corners, it just cracked the piece. So, just as a reminder, close and latch canopies. And now, Mr. Knopf. He is going to do the, he's already taken, okay. He's going to do the, I'll tell you. Thanks, Ron.
Okay. Last fall, I was getting ready to do a flight review with Chris Norris and the Husky. I like to alternate between the Husky and the glider. And that got washed out for weather the first time, and it got washed out the second time because the canopy or the hangar door is stuck for the Pawnee, so the Husky had to tow. So Chris graciously decided to let me do the flight review in the glider. And I had recently talked to Glenn Collins, who ghost wrote an article for the Soaring magazine with Rich Carlson. And it was an article called The Art of the Possible Turn. And basically the same thing that the Navy does if you lose a person overboard, which is turn the wrong way first and come back on track. So their point was that you can reduce the need for a low altitude rollout on a low altitude rope break by turning the wrong way first, i.e. downwind first. They published that article. A couple months later there was some pushback, but the arguments on both sides were mostly just opinions. There wasn't really any analysis behind it, but they did close out by saying, think about it. So we thought about it. So we did these 3 flights kind of as a science experiment with an open mind to see what it really looked like. And the answer was fairly simple, but it invited a whole lot of other questions for which the answers were not quite so simple. Oh, come on, buddy. All right. So we did the first 3 flights of the day. They were all 200-foot rope brakes with Chris pulling the handle at 200 on the rear seat altimeter. And I took all of the IGC files and I re-indexed the times so that when the flight recorder said LX takeoff, it was all 10 o'clock exactly local. So when I synced all these things up, you can see them all on top of each other. It was a negligibly windy day, cold day, towing behind the Husky, Hugh was towing. All of the takeoffs looked just about the same. And we discovered after picking these things apart that the release was not at 200, it was more like 270 feet due to altimeter lag. That was an interesting aha. So the left track is the direct turn back, the way I always flew it, which is start the turn, drop the nose, bend it around. The green and the red tracks came next. And that was basically a 45-degree turn away, reverse the turn, come back. And it looked pretty much like I thought it was gonna, except that on the second 2, I wasn't in any big hurry to get the nose dumped, and you can see the glider continue to climb for a few feet. So here's the sync takeoffs. They all start the same place, but the direct turn lands a full 20 seconds before the other guys. So if you have lots of altitude, yeah, you avoid a low altitude turn that you otherwise might have had. This is what it looked like from the cockpit. This was taken, we actually had 3 video recorders and 3 flight recorders recording all this. These videos were from the hat camera that I had attached to my hat, and on the first one my hat wasn't on exactly straight. But you'll get the idea here. So starting all of these in about the same place.
Yeah. 3 videos at once.
The spoilers are out well before the rollout on the final, on the direct turn back. On the 2 long ones, I checked the spoilers, but the spoilers were basically closed for most of that long approach. And I stopped the video here when the nose wheel was on the ground.
What was the wind? Nothing.
2 or 3 knots variable.
Well, yeah.
Pretty conclusive.
Wow, I don't see that.
That's John.
All right, so my initial insights were, yeah, if you do the offset turn, it avoids a low altitude rollout, but it wasn't really that big of a deal anyway. And the altimeter lag was a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be. I wonder what it was going to look like if the release actually was at 200 feet, or even if it was at 150 feet. Or for that matter, if you had to land in one of those other crappy fields that is not a return to the airfield. But I'm not interested in flying any of those, so I needed some tools to look at what it might actually look like. So I took the IGC file, I broke it apart into 1-second increments, put it in a spreadsheet, analyzed turn rates and headings and sync rates and things like that, sufficient to the point where I could reconstruct what an approach to a different place or from a different release point would have looked like. And basically it amounts to maintain best over D speed until landing is assured, fly a turn about like you would a thermal wing turn, and I looked at 3 different climb out rates, 400, 600, and 800 feet per minute on the tow plane, with the climb out originating at the midfield taxiway, which is about what happens normally. Normally you take off and you accelerate the ground effect, and about the time you hit the midfield taxiway, the tow plane starts climbing. So just for standardization, that's the way I look at these. So first hard question was, what if instead of 270 feet at release, we were at 200 or 150 feet, and we were on a slow climb out, like behind a Husky on a high density altitude day. So on the top slide there, the rainbow colors were the practice one that we did from 700 feet. The red one would be a 150-foot release. The blue one would be a 200-foot release, and they both make it back to the runway. On the other hand, if you take the offset turn, neither of the low altitude releases make it back even to the airfield perimeter. So now that looks a lot less attractive.
I got a question, if I may.
Yep.
Like Sullenberger said, did you think about the human factor? So, you're in a climbing attitude on tow. The rope goes away, whatever your tow. It takes a few seconds to realize that something's happened. You're slowing down, slowing down. So, what if there was a 2, 3, 5 second delay before an action was taken?
Actually, we're going to get to that.
Thank you. All right.
What a figure. Needed question.
I couldn't wait.
All right. Here's another one. Go back to the 700 foot per minute climb out, same as we had on the test, but 150 foot AGL. See what it looks like if instead of making that big lazy turn on the offset return, we tighten it up a little bit, only turn 30 degrees away before bending it back, so it looked more like the eye of a needle instead of the full offset. And the answer is still the direct turn gets you back with more altitude to start. Yep.
Ground track.
All right, different end of the spectrum on options. If you've got a 15-knot headwind, yeah, you could extend straight ahead, but you could extend straight ahead either with a direct turn before starting it or with that offset turn. Then you've still got a 15-knot tailwind to land in. That's a long time just being on the runway along for the ride with no control effectiveness. 15 knots of wind is actually 25 feet per second drifting. If you can get if you can squeeze a 40-second, 360-degree turn out of that, it blows you all the way back to the midfield taxiway, and use the whole second half of the runway plus overrun if you need it to land, which to me looks like a much more attractive option than a big high-speed down at the landing. Effective winds. This is a 600 foot per minute climb out with no wind, a 5-knot headwind, a 5-knot tailwind, and a 5-knot crosswind. And there's not really any surprises here. It changes the shape and the displacement of it a little bit, but not a big deal at 5 knots. It would have been a big deal at 15 knots, which is the case we just looked at. All right, now we get into the even harder questions, which is if you can't turn around and come back, how about it? What does it take to stick it in all those little crappy places all around the airfield? If there's any chance of getting it down and getting it stopped in the overrun, that should probably be your first choice. If you do have to go in one of the bad spots, remember to prioritize. The only thing that matters once you've decided that's where you're going is your safety. The glider's insured. Don't let that overrun any of your other considerations. Worth pointing out that early in your glider career, you probably read the book and it said you adjust the pitch attitude to hold the airspeed that you want, and you adjust the spoilers to get the descent rate that you want, and as long as it's pointed generally at the runway, that's good enough. But if you're trying to get into one of these little postage stamp spots, just remember that the glider will go where you point it as long as it's within the flight envelope. You need to point the glider where it needs to go. So it's a matter of being a lot more aggressive about how you direct the glider. Vertical nose-first landings are almost always fatal. So even if it's a small postage stamp, just don't get slow, don't skid, don't spin, don't go in nose first. If you can get it down on the ground loop it so that when you hit the trees or the fence post or the barbed wire strand, it's not nose first. Hit it tail first or wing first. And I think it was Bob Hoover that said, fly the aircraft as far into the accident as possible. Okay, looking at the overrun first. 530 feet long, it's nice, it's mowed, it's got no big divots in it. On the pictures that you're going to see with the glide slopes, the lower angle going in is 24-to-1. The green is roughly half spoilers. An 8-to-1, that's a pretty typical approach angle. And the blue is full spoilers, a little bit steeper descent rate. But that's not the limit of what you can actually get down. You'll see at the video at the very end, I was doing 3-to-1 at 65 knots with the spoilers full open, and it really comes down in a hurry. But the time to practice it is not on your first rope break.
Is that just spoilers?
Is what?
Just spoilers at
Just
65?
spoilers, no slip,
No slip.
nose down.
Visions of rope break, you can
The
realize.
peak maneuver.
It's okay, it was instructional.
The corner pocket, the left corner pocket, I used to call out all the time as a place where I would go when the overrun wasn't available. But as it turns out, it's not really any better. It's slightly shorter, but it's slightly more uphill. But you have to turn to get there. So if you don't start that turn by about the time you pass the lake, it's really no better. I was just calling it out because once the overrun is below the nose, this looks more attractive. It's not really much better. Recently, people have started calling out the field to the right. It's not bad. It's 650 feet long. The trees at the end of it aren't too bad. But again, that's quite an offset, and it's not very far down the runway direction. So unless you start that turn being the lake next to the runway, you're probably too far to make the turn and get it in there. And its cousin, the one that angles just on the far side of the road, that's even harder to get into because the trees are pretty tall that you would have to get over to get in there, and you still have to start the turn in the same place. Beyond the road, straight ahead, there's 320 feet after you get it over the fence line. That's less than the length of a football field if you count the end zones. Amounts to really nothing more than a place to get it on the ground and ground loop it. The one that we've always called out, taking off on runway 28, is the field to the left. There's a little bit of an obstacle course to get in there. You have to get over the trees. You have to stay right of the spur of trees and the pond. You have to stay left of the gully. It's a nice long field, but it's doable. Just don't be surprised when you get there and realize that it's not all one big flat field.
And it looks to me, in my opinion, many times, if you're high enough to make it in there, you're high enough to make it back to the runway.
Yep.
Exactly.
Have we checked any wires, any cables, anything in that area?
No.
There's a power line that goes
No,
diagonally across the
but there's
first part
some,
of the field.
there's that internal fence.
Yeah.
This one here, there's a gully. There's the spur of trees and a pond.
And there is a power line.
There is a power.
There is a
Power
further
line
down.
to the first part
Yeah,
of the
but-
field.
Yeah, but it's down. And there's often hay beds. Its cousin to the far left is really not very good at all because the trees are much higher to get in there. And for sure, if you've got the altitude to get into this one, you've probably got the altitude to turn back around and land on the runway. Okay, turn into runway 10. The overrun is a little bit shorter. It's strongly downhill right at the end, and there's nothing good when you get to the end. About the only thing you could do to improve your chances are is if you could get it on the ground and maybe drag a wingtip and steer it left around the F-86. You might give yourself a few more extra feet.
It's been done by airplanes.
the big long hilltop that's 45 left off of 10 is nice and long, but it's strongly downhill. It's the top of a ridge line with gullies on both sides. If you tried to ground loop and it didn't go well, you could end up way down in the gully. And I've seen farm equipment, sheep, movable free-range chicken coops, all kinds of things out there. It's never been plowed, so there's probably also rocks. So it's a place where you could probably survive, maybe not so good for the glider. And finally, the field to the right with all of the wires. It's got some distance to it, but for sure, if you've got enough to get over those wires, you've probably got enough room to turn and bring it back home. There's a high set of wires here, low set of wires here, and an internal set of wires that are sometimes there, sometimes not there. I think they use it to manage grazing areas for livestock. Okay, so turning back to the return to land option, at the last day of the year, I came out and Ron was the duty instructor, and I asked if we could do one more rope break. And his job in the back was to tap on the altimeter and see if that helped reduce the altimeter lag a little bit, and to be absolutely objective about release altitudes and to call it out for the camera and things like that. I also wanted to look at what would that turn look like if I wasn't in such a damn hurry to bury the nose and start the turn. Especially after we discovered that the glider actually gained a little bit just by not being in a hurry to do anything drastic on the rope brakes. And what we actually found was when my altimeter had just started to move on the takeoff roll, mine read 50 feet. Ron's, when he was tapping on it, read 100 feet. And we were actually at 150 feet, as documented on the flight recorder. And also, as it turned out, looking at the angle of the sun and calculating backwards, we were almost exactly at solar noon, almost exactly perpendicular to the direction of the sun. The sun angle was 30 degrees above the horizon. So when the shadow of the tow plane was 300 feet away from the center line of the runway, the tow plane was at 150 feet. Pretty simple math. Wow. When we did get up here, and Ron's calling out the altitudes, when he said we were 50 or 200 feet AGL, mine still showed 120 feet AGL, and we were well above the 200. We were at about 250.
700 feet. Calling higher altitudes. I said 900 and I pulled instantly, and then I'm calling like 940. You hear the calls now, I'm just now calling 900.
Yeah, I'm going to replay a high-res version of it, and there'll be some things to look at when we pull that apart.
So what was the release?
When this short clip stops, I said done. I hadn't planned to say that, but mentally what was going through my mind was I'd completed the turn. We were roughly aligned with the end of the runway, and we were 250 AGL over the threshold, and it was time to turn my attention to the other problem, which was how to get down. If you've ever wondered about what it takes to trade airspeed for altitude, it's just simple physics. Trading potential energy and kinetic energy. The amount of altitude that you actually get in a glider depends on how much time you spend under how much drag, or the efficiency in doing that conversion. But for this slow end down here, from 65 knots to 50, not much, maybe 50 feet. But if you're releasing at 150 feet, that makes a difference. Oh, and just because I had room on the slide to put it down there, rough order of magnitude, if you're running a sort of a mental clock as to how fast things happen during a tow, if you're climbing out at 9 knots, that's 15 feet a second, or 10 seconds to get to 150 feet. All right, so some conclusions after reevaluating what we saw. Is as tools and techniques go, that Soaring Safety Foundation idea about doing the offset turn, yeah, it's a thing to consider, but I personally can't think of any circumstance where I would really want to try it, especially if that rope break came as a complete surprise and I didn't have time to think about alternatives. I know turning back works. Secondly, I really don't want to have a low altitude rope break. So the fact that we take the health and welfare of our tow ropes very seriously is a good thing. Third, altimeter lag is real, it's significant, but it's highly variable. We saw a difference between towing out on a Husky on a cold day versus towing out on a Pawnee on a cold day. So
you don't think I need to replace the altimeters?
No. They all do that.
Yeah, mechanical
Just the differing amounts. So how much you've got depends on the climb rate, the individual instrument, how much vibration there is, probably internal drag depending on the instrument itself, maybe the plumbing. If you ignore the fact that there's some altimeter lag, it might lead you to putting in one of those postage stamp fields when in fact you had plenty of room to turn around and come back. The other side of that coin is if you overestimate how much altimeter lag there is, it might lead you to attempting the return when you don't really have it. So your educated eyeball still has value. If you can look underneath the glider and say, yeah, I've got 3 wingspans down there, that's enough to turn around and come back, that counts for something. Also remember that you can get away with things in an ASK-21 because it's such a docile, gentle aircraft that would not work in a PW5 or a Discus or any private glider. So some unsolicited recommendations. There's nothing in the ops manual that says that you cannot practice a rope break on your own, but I think it's a terrible idea. I think, especially if you're going to go out and look at some of these techniques that maybe you haven't done before, do it with an instructor. Also, take it as a serious learning opportunity. Take the Club Nano and record it. If you've got a video, hands off, record it, come back, take a look at it, run it through CU to analyze what you actually got, look at the video. If you don't have the tools to do that, send me the IGC file, I'll analyze it for you and send it back to you. But always ask what could have been done better. And when you go out to fly, don't just rattle it off because you heard that Pete wants to hear that on a check ride. You have to say straight ahead, through the left return. Think about where the transition points are between the things that you can do that can save your life. And the idea is not to have any spots where there's no good choices. Oh, and finally, we never talk about it, but if the rope actually did break and part of it's still hanging from the glider, don't drag it through the trees, but if you've got plenty of altitude to work with, think about jettisoning it after you get inside the airfield boundary so you don't drop it on somebody's head. Okay, we've got some more videos.
Yep. quick question for you. How do you purposefully ground loop? What do you do? Drop
Oh. To purposely ground loop an airplane,
Wing and rudder. same
you want
direction.
all the weight on the main gear. So if you're in a tail dragger, stick forward. If you're in a nose dragger, stick aft. Full rudder, plant the wingtip.
Okay.
So years ago, Tom Knopf had people call out 200 feet.
Yep.
Thousands of people went through the school and it morphed into a go, no go. I talked to Tom. It's not a go, no go. It's just situational awareness. I want you to, because you're so focused on the toe, call out 200 feet. But it morphed into
700 feet.
It's not a go, no go. I was in a 233, I think, with George Hazelrig, and we did a 125 footer and had to use spoilers to get back down coming back to the runway. So it'd be a shame to be indicating 190 feet and say, oh, I can't make it back, try to make it into one of those fields and wreck it, when you could have turned back.
Yeah, that's kind of my whole point.
We were in the K and we hadn't reached the road yet.
What? Yeah.
And when we turned around, we got over the runway and it was, are we really going to get it down?
So you got to look at each situation separately, each day, each flight, each tow, and think of every point along the way. What would you do? Come up with a decision, and you're practicing for the day when it will happen. And you probably won't be thinking about it that second, but you'll be better able to handle it.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're practicing this in Condor, remember Condor is probably using the factory Polar, and it doesn't have certified roll rates, it doesn't have feedback, it probably doesn't have any altimeter leg. So it's useful fun, but it's not the way to decide what you can actually do with the glider. All right, so this is what that whole thing looked like from the cockpit. Pay attention to the airspeed down here.
His altimeter compared to what I call it.
Straight ahead. Straight ahead. Straight ahead. Straight ahead. My altimeter still hasn't moved. 20, 40, 60, 80, 800, 20, 40, 60, 80, 900. 960. Done. 960. 960. 940, 29, 880, 840, 800. 780, 760. Well, that was a weird experiment. And this last one, Brian Clark took a video of from the ground.
Oh, yeah.
What you'll see here is it looks like the nose is up quite a bit, but it's only up.
There's going to be a rope break. Should go right about now.
That's definitely about 200.
Lower the nose. There you go.
So bend it back around.
And then you guys are going up next. Yep.
Here's where I shut it done and dump the nose. but it sure comes down in a hurry when you bury the nose spoilers out full of what gears can come up. Right here.
Back down again. John Noss flying. Ron Wagner is his passenger.
We're going to have to get him off the runway.
Yeah.
All right, I know that was kind of long and tedious, but hopefully it's just enough to make you think about rope breaks in a slightly different light. Brian?
I think it's great I have two questions actually. Hopefully they'll be quick. Is 200 what we should be saying anymore? I mean, I've done 60 or 70 rope breaks.
Shane pointed that out. That whole 200 thing was just to make you aware of watching your altimeter. There's nothing magic about 200 feet.
And are you gonna present this to the Soaring Safety Foundation so that they can modify their?
They've already pretty much made up their mind that the reverse turn is the approved solution. And George can tell you, we typically get in the urinating contest with the soaring safety standard at first. Anyway.
But I was going to comment that the situation is totally different if the tow plane is having a problem and it's slowing down.
Yes.
And because I pulled off behind the Husky one day when I thought he was having engine problems and we're doing 45 knots. And you want to push the nose down right away at that point instead of getting that extra 50 feet.
Yes.
Completely different situation.
There's a little less stressful exercise that I often use in flight reviews. That's on a right turnout and having a rope break at about 400 feet. And depending upon the wind directions, the options are just bizarre. Immediately turn right and land on the takeoff runway, make a 180. I mean, it's interesting for the decision-making process because suddenly there's a lot of options, and depending upon the conditions, it can be kind of fun, and it's a little bit safer.
One more thing. I've been at 500 feet on tow in a two-place, out of Front Royal, and if the rope broke, I would not make the airport. So the 200-foot rule, forget about it. It really depends on where you are and what's going on at that moment.
Yep.
When you were looking at it, I didn't see any numbers on the slides. On a still day, is there actually a gap where you will overshoot the overrun, but you can't make the turn back?
It depends.
I mean, on a still day.
We don't want to talk about that.
Okay.
You're looking at, aim for the pines, real slow, real slow.
Yeah, it really does depend. I mean, not just whether it's a still day, but
how many people are in the glider, which tow plane?
Altitude, which tow plane. There's no standard day at Front Royal.
So from what I'm gathering, you're saying not so much to look at your altimeter, but judge it by eyeball.
By all means, look at your altimeter.
Yeah, I know you'll look at it, but from what I saw is you were getting different readings.
Yeah,
in there.
When my altimeter said 50 feet, and we actually had 150 feet, and I looked down there and I said, I bet we have 3 wingspans down there.
Okay, so ultimately you used your own judgment.
Yeah.
John, what about the other situation? The new Pawnee has so much more performance. I've been, on the altimeter saying 300 feet, and I'm not even to the end of the runway yet.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I have to fly farther away from the airport before I can.
If there's not a lot of tailwind, you can definitely fly further away from the airport before coming back. But if there is a headwind, that's why I showed that big lazy 360 to land into the wind. All options. Okay.
Thank you, John. Oscar says he can do it in 120.
All right, 12 o'clock. I hope this is a 20-minute presentation, but it might go a little bit longer. So here we go. Here's me. If you don't know who I am, this is me. I'm Pete Barber. My name is spelled funny, but you just say it just like regular old Pete. It's a Dutch spelling for those of you who are curious. I've been flying since I was a little kid. So all of you who are starting at a young age, you've got the right time to start. I started at age 14. And I sold it at age 15, just a couple of weeks before my 16th birthday. I still call it 15 because still 15 years old. So I got my pilot's license for gliders in 1993.
Why did it take you so long?
Why did it take so long? I was in college. And I had really crappy instructors. And I got my instructor rating in 2003, my DPE in 2015, and it's all been downhill since then. So I managed to get gold seal instructor rating in 2023, got 1,600 hours, 2,600 landings, no go rounds. Kind of cool. And I just got my third diamond for my gold badge on the 4th of March for the flight on the 29th of February.
What's gold seal mean?
Gold seal means that I have gotten the advanced ground instructor rating, which means I took a complicated written test of the entire bank of the FAA's questions and their instructors for every category. That includes like multi-engine and like gyroplanes, and I had to like memorize 1,800 answers. So it took a long time to study for that. So when I did that, and being a DPE, doing 10 check rides per year is enough, but I did 20 that year when I applied for it. So they just signed off and I got it. So I don't know very many glider-only instructors who have the gold seal. I can't find anyone else who has one. So.
Isn't it 90% passing rate for your students?
Yeah, but I'm a DPE, so they say if you're a DPE 2 and you do enough check rides, then it's really hard to get enough to do a gold seal as a glider instructor. You have to do 10 check rides within your 2 years, and 90% of them have to pass the first time. It's pretty hard to get that one. So we have a few gold seal instructors in our club, but they also have airplane ratings as well. Okay, so we're going to go over these 4 things here. I'm going to go over the hazardous attitudes. This is part of the aeronautical decision making. We're going to talk a little bit about wave flying because it's relevant to me and what I've recently done. And that's going to go right into the dangers of high altitude flying and hypoxia, which is associated with that. And we'll wrap it up with oxygen systems. Let's get started here. All right. So throughout the presentation, you'll find the QR code. If you want to find the reference for what I'm talking about, I would welcome you to pull out your phone and hit the QR code. It'll take you to the document involved here. The QR code is in reference to the FAA advisory circular for what aeronautical decision making is. And aeronautical decision making, one subset of it is the kind of bad attitudes that we can start to build up as time goes on. And these bad attitudes can hit you any time of your training, whether you're a student or whether you've got 2,600 landings and gliders. The mental failures that get us pilots can happen anywhere in our career. So you have to be vigilant and make sure that you're aware of these attitudes. We'll talk about what they are and how to counteract them with the antidotes. So the hazardous attitudes, there's 5 of them. Invulnerability, macho, anti-authority, resignation, and impulsivity. And if you can't remember what these are, just think of me. I am a real idiot. So the I am a real idiot is a great way for you to remember this because like you're not thinking clearly when you're falling into these mountain traps. Go into each one of these. Invulnerability. It tends to get to people with a lot of experience. I've survived this gliding career for 35 years. It hasn't gotten me yet. What could possibly go wrong? It doesn't tend to get the more junior ones, but people who have a lot of youth, people who don't have a lot of, when I was younger, I did a lot of stupider things, and I'm sure that everyone else who's older in this room has the same opinion, and we got away with it. Something called a survivorship bias. I don't know if you ever saw those Facebook posts where someone says, I rode around in the back of a pickup truck and I drank water from the garden hose. Well, I mean, that's a survivorship bias in a way because the people who got into an accident and were thrown out of the pickup truck bed, they died. They're not here to brag about how they survived that. So there's a survivorship bias there. Invulnerability is the attitude that, it hasn't gotten me yet, it's not going to get me, or I'm invulnerable, I'm not going to suffer from this. So here's an example of it. I fly in the safest club in the country, and we're so much better than that other club. And my instructor, he said that we have a better safety culture than that other club. And when you get into that mindset, it rebuilds that invulnerability. Like, this can't possibly happen to us because we're so good. I keep telling myself I'm so good. It can't possibly happen to me. I'm a retired Air Force pilot or Navy pilot. I have 10,000 hours of time. The Air Force trained me perfectly. You don't think you'll have some invulnerability building up with that attitude? I'm sure that they don't allow that sort of thing in the Air Force either. So you've got to recognize it and call it out and see. I have really good luck at the poker table. Me personally, I don't believe in luck at all. There's no such thing as luck. It's just how you see it in the retrospect. Here's a situation where someone can get into an attitude of invulnerability where it shows itself. So here's a scenario. While pre-flighting, your friend Bob's 50-year-old private glider, you notice the control stick makes a funny noise and a slight bump when you pull back on the control stick. I'm sure if something happened in flight, my superior pilot skills will help me survive this moment. I'm sure I'll be able to handle it. I got luck on my side. You know, I'm pretty good at the poker tables. I've been pretty lucky before. You may not say those words in your brain, but you may have that attitude building up from all the experience that you've got. I heard somebody say that the drive to the airport is more dangerous than flying gliders. Chances are, I'll probably be okay. That was an expression that was said a lot during the 70s and 80s, and when I started flying gliders when I was 14 years old, that was a very common expression. The most dangerous part of your flying day is the drive to the airport. There's a book out there called Goodbye or Farewell Papa Golf. It's written by Chip Bearden, and he hates that expression. He goes into a deep dialogue about why that quote there has done more against safety than anything else in the soaring community. So the idea is that we are all fragile and we do make mistakes, and you can't feel like you're invulnerable. You have to be aware that invulnerability is a bad attitude. How do we fix it? Well, we have some candidates here. So this absolutely can get me. Just because I have this many years of flying gliders doesn't mean that I'm invulnerable. Anytime a safety event comes up, I think about it and I readjust my safety parameters. We'll go into that later. I'm going to give you an example of a time when I recognized an unhealthy attitude and I fixed it for that particular problem. Maybe I have other ones I don't know about yet, but that one we close that one up. So fatal accidents have happened to better pilots than me. And whenever I review the accident reports, and it's too bad Allison is out sick today and she's not going to go over the accident reports, but every time I review those accident reports, I don't look at the hours and think, oh, that guy only had 100 hours. I'm better than him. I always think, that guy's probably smarter than me. He's probably better than me. He has better training than me. He probably has better habits than me. What situations could I have been in to cause this accident? What kind of types of attitudes did I have that could reinforce that? That's a real type of self-introspection you have to have when you're viewing these accident reports. Let's go on to the next one. Macho. Now, we all know what macho is, especially for those who watch Happy Days and you think of Henry Winkler when he was showing his roles of Fonz, right? Macho means, yeah, all right. Pilots with macho attitude are always trying to impress others, trying to jump over the shark with his motorcycle, right? He's always trying to impress other people. They take unnecessary risks. And some people say macho only affects men. Does not. It's women just as well. Especially when you have a situation where the Amelia Earhart is trying to prove herself in a group of men. She might take unnecessary chances flying across the Pacific or whatever. So it can happen to anyone in here. Don't let invulnerability hit you for the macho attitude too. Which leads to foolish and often dangerous behavior. And the quote that they have in the advisory circular is, I'll show those guys, I'll show them how good I am. I'll show them that I can fly longer than anyone else. I'll show them I can fly further than anyone else. So here's a good situation for macho. So you are doing cross-country tasks. You're flying a polygon, multiple waypoints along the way. You finished 2 out of the 3 turn points. The weather has been turned for the worse. The 2 pilots you were flying with, who've also decided to do the task, have given up on the task and they've already headed back to the airport. So they skipped that 3rd turn point. But you, with your macho attitude getting to you, you're saying, I'll show Paul, he's one of the other pilots doing the task, I'll show him that I'm better than him by finishing the task. And now you're doing it in increasingly worse weather. Whether it could be something like a thunderstorm is coming in, or a derecho is coming in. It could be something like that. If you're trying to show off to the other guy how much better you are, that could be a hazardous attitude if the conditions. So taking unnecessary chances is foolish. And how do we fix that? Well, here's the antidote. Taking unnecessary chances is foolish. So you have to be aware that trying to show off to your friends and taking unnecessary chances, that's the only way to do it. It's just to, you got to resist that. You got to think about it. You got to realize it. You got to think of the antidote. Taking unnecessary chances is foolish. Moving on to the anti-authority, and this one can hit anyone in their training program, early in the training or late in the training program. And you know, I have to work hard against this one as well. Those rules are made by an out-of-touch FAA, and they don't apply to me. I mean, how many times have you read some regulation where you say, man, that was really written for an airplane guy, not written for a glider guy? I find myself in that trap all the time. I stop myself and say, there's a reason why those regs were written. Those regs were written because there was some sort of accident, probably in the distant past, and someone had either been injured or killed because of this outcome. They made a rule for it, and those rules are probably there for a reason. So that stupid club rule is made with a novice pilot in mind. I'm not a novice, therefore I don't need to follow any of that rule. Here's an example of where someone who has more experience can be really vulnerable to the anti-authority. Those rules don't apply to me. Nobody at the FAA has a tape measure to see if I'm actually 500 feet below cloud base. Yeah, it looks good to me. Let's keep climbing. I don't do this one. I really don't. I've heard other people say this before, and I would really like to not hear this anymore.
Sorry, Pete.
Anti-authority. This attitude is found in people who do not like anyone telling them what to do. In a sense, they are saying, no one can tell me what to do. And they may be resentful of having someone else tell them what to do, or may regard rules, regulations, and procedures as silly or unnecessary. However, it's always your prerogative to question authority if you feel it is an error. So here's a situation for anti-authority. So while flying, near the end of the day, with a long cross-country task, you see there's a sky, blue ahead of you, en route to the next turn point. That means there's probably no thermals, there's no thermal clouds. So you're below the last visible thermal with a good-looking cumulus cloud, top of this thermal, and you determine if you maximize the amount of altitude with this climb, you'll have enough to touch the turn point and make a final glide to get home. So I can circle in this terminal until I get just under the cloud, and that ought to give me enough altitude to make it. Well, the reason that's a hazardous attitude is because the rules of the FAA cloud clearance requirements, those don't apply to me. Those are made for the airplanes. Those out-of-touch FAA guys made that rule. It's a rule for everybody. Sorry. You have to deal with that rule. You have to follow that rule. There's a reason for it, because when you keep climbing and you get into that cloud, you'll lose reference to the horizon, and it's very, very quickly your glider can go from a stable turn into a graveyard spiral. And there's a circumstance where you can get sucked up into the cloud, and no matter what type of descent you attempt to do with spoilers or increasing speed or whatever, it cannot overcome the updraft velocity, which changes when you get into the cloud. So you can get sucked into the cloud, and you can keep climbing without any ability to get out of it. And you can come out of the side of the cloud upside down, past your maneuvering speed or past your V&E. I would never recommend you guys flying into a cloud in a glider. Would not ever recommend that. And
Well, also
you
you
gotta
have
do everything you
instrument-
do to not get into the situation.
coming out
And
of
at
that cloud,
500
too.
feet there is for separation from aircraft that are on IFR, and it's to keep you from getting sucked into that cloud. There's a reason that rule is there. It's not just some out-of-touch FAA rule that doesn't apply to you. There's a reason for it. People died. Don't do it. It's stupid. Shame.
No, that was going to say, it's instrument clearance too.
Yes.
Be ashamed to have somebody just fly right through you.
Yep.
They're in the cloud thinking they're safe.
Yep. Yep.
In Pittsburgh, they put some A-10 warthogs on like 500 foot below the cloud holding pattern. So the gliders are up there sucking up underneath the clouds, and all these like 3 A-10 warthogs came through, and they decided they would land the second time the A-10 warthog would fly. So yeah, they do park aircraft right below the cloud base because nobody in VFR is there.
That's right. It's a good reason to have transponders so that they won't route the planes in your direction.
What does the S stand for in ADS-B?
Surveillance. Yeah, but they don't really know how high the clouds are. So, yeah. Let's keep going. Pick it up, Pete. Pick it up. All right. The rules are there for a reason. Follow the rules. Are usually right. Resignation. What's the use? What's the use is the attitude for resignation. Like, man, we're screwed. What's the use? There's nothing I can do about it. I'll tell you, but you're not completely screwed. So all these are like, man, I give up. So the resignation is, what's the use is what the pilot can think about himself. Don't see themselves being able to make a great deal of difference in what happens to them. When things go well, the pilot's up to thinking it's good luck. When things go badly, the pilot may feel someone's out to get them or attributed to bad luck. The pilot will leave this action to others, for better or for worse. Sometimes pilots will even go along with unreasonable requests to be the nice guy. So the situation is, you're out, you're north of Front Grill, circling over White Coast Airfield, getting lower and lower, further from the field. Your flight computer says your globe lights up to make it home. There's a weak thermal a while ago, it's not there now. Since I know I can't make it home with my altitude, I better just keep looking for that lift. I know it's around here somewhere. Instead of taking a decisive decision to get back home. So here's another one. You're on airtow, you're 100 feet AGL, rope breaks, too far along the land runway you just took off from. Through your flight training, you only know how to return from the airport at 200 feet. We drilled this issue into the ground. John's presentation. I'm below minimum altitude to return to the airport. I guess I'll just crash now. It sounds funny, but you get into that situation, and I know some of the more experienced pilots who've been in like really bad situations. Happened to me before. I know Shane's told me once when he said, "Well, I don't know, what are you gonna do?" Well, the answer is there's always something you can do, and I'm gonna talk about the Bob Hoover quote that John mentioned before. If you're faced with a forced landing, fly the thing as far into the crash as possible. You are still making control inputs to continue flying that glider. Make sure that you crash it horizontally, not vertically. If you crash your glider horizontally in something, you're probably going to survive. If you crash vertically, you're probably not going to survive. It's not hopeless. You can still take action to make the glider fly the way you want it to until the glider comes to a complete stop. Density is less than ground density. So the impulsivity is the last one. This is the one that I have a hard time with when I'm in contests. And I just released from an air tow. I think I'm going to go fly 300K today. Did you prepare for that 300K? Did you look at the weather forecast for the whole area you're doing for 300K? Ah, shiny. Hey, look, I'm going to go to that cloud. OLC makes me do that a lot. See a cloud over there. I'm going to go over there. Yeah. So impulsivity is like, I didn't plan anything out. I didn't think through my actions. The attitude of people who frequently feel the need to do something, anything immediately, and they don't stop to think about what they're about to do. They don't select the best alternative, and they do the first thing that comes to mind. If you don't have a bunch of experience, you can fall into this trap of just doing something, do anything. And doing anything may not be the right course of action. Doing the right thing, if you're prepared for it, would be the right thing to do. So situation, so you're borrowing your friend Paul's glider for the day. It's a great soaring day. You're now heading into the landing pattern. You have to sequence yourself behind 2 tow planes, 3 other gliders, and all the activity you forgot to do your pre-landing checklist. And it is a glider you're not that familiar with. So on short final, you realize, oh, I didn't remember to check the landing gear. There's no time to go through the checklist. You just throw down the landing gear handle. Did I move the handle forward or backward to lower the gear? I'm pretty sure it's forward. No, backward. No, just move the handle. Just do something. Don't just do something. You got to think about your actions. So the antidote for impulsivity is just don't do everything. Think about what you're doing. So to recap, the hazardous attitudes are listed both in the advisory circular, the first QR code, and the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge in Chapter 2, which is the second QR code. Are you ready? All right. So there's the first hazardous attitudes, wave flying. This is so cool. So our wave camp, we had the last week of February and the first day of March. We got everything moved there on the Sunday. We had some cloudy, rainy days, and by Thursday we finally got into it, and we got some output. We got diamond climbs and bullet climbs. We had the perfect sky sight day for it. You can see the wave window that I drew on here. This was the flight tracker flight that I did. Got to 22,000 feet. This is the SkySat view at 13,000 feet, and this is SkySat view at 23,000 feet. So the red means air is going up, and blue means air is going down, and green means somewhere in between. And the little flight track on there is where I was to my flight. Cool flight. This is a side view of where all the updrafts are. You can see over here in the bottom right corner that burner field is. There's burner field. There's right. Yeah, there's front row. So you see all this red stuff. Definitely where all the lift was. think we have time to show this video. Anyway.
No.
Yeah.
We got till 1 o'clock.
I'll just move on. That's a cool video. You should check it out. We'll have to upload the PowerPoint later, and you can click on it then. I'm sure everyone here has seen it already. This is the book that I really like to talk about how to work with Wave, and most importantly, in the last part of the book, they have a section about hypoxia and how it can sneak up on you. So why does hypoxia happen? So it turns out that there's a really large amount of calories of your body are devoted to keep your brain running, and your brain requires fuel, and the type of fuel that your brain requires is a chemical called ATP, and that is adenosine triphosphate, and they call it triphosphate because there are 3 phosphate molecules here attached to it. And the way that your brain uses that fuel is your body takes this process, it pops off this little phosphate molecule at the end, and you get adenosine diphosphate, ADP. And then when your mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, get glucose, combines it with oxygen to make fuel for you for the next round. So this is like a little short-term rechargeable battery that your brain uses for fuel. And if you don't have this in oxygen, you don't have the fuel for your brain to work. And your body has a very low stockpile of it. You have only about 11 seconds worth. So if you were to have your system removed of oxygen, it's about 11 seconds of useful time for your brain to keep operating. And then it runs out of fuel, and then you just go to sleep or whatever. So most people think, I can hold my breath for 3 minutes. This is crazy. Well, when you're holding your breath, you still have oxygen in your lungs. And if you were to exhale and flush your lungs from all the air, like if you were to breathe into a helium balloon and then breathe out and inhale from a helium balloon, do that 3 or 4 times to flush all the oxygen out, you'll be passed out within a couple of seconds. Probably about 11 seconds. So high altitude hypoxia. The FAA has a rule. We talked about how rules apply to you, even if you don't like them. Let's talk about the hazardous attitude of anti-authority. The rules that we operate for in this glider club are Part 91 rules. And Part 91, section 91.211, talks about supplemental oxygen. And I'll go over this real quick. Supplemental oxygen at 12,500 feet to 14,000 feet. If you do it less than 30 minutes, you're in good shape. You don't need any oxygen. Once you're above, or once you've gone past that 30 minutes there, you're going to have supplemental oxygen. Anytime you're above 14,000 feet, you need to have oxygen at full time. And anytime above 15,000 feet, you have to provide your passengers with supplemental oxygen. Do they have to take it? Greg doesn't say it. I'll make them take it. I don't know why they wrote that. That's so weird to me. You can take this oxygen or not. Whatever. This is a great video. Has everyone seen this yet? Yeah, this is a great video. Please work. All right, that's why I have this.
And as you feel your symptoms, go ahead and let us know what they are. 6 of spades. I feel really good right now. 6 of spades.
He's in a hyperbaric chamber. They have effectively 25,000 feet or higher about to there. His job is to pull out that card, read off what it is, show it to you. He took his mask off at the beginning of this video. I can see it in his eyes.
What was the last card? Tingling in the toes right now. Look at that code again. Everything has its code.
See that labor breathing?
4 of spades. What is that called? 4 of spades.
It's a 5 of spades, not 4 of spades.
4 of spades. 4 of spades.
It did not take him long to get here, did it?
What is that code, sir?
He does have a smile on
What are you feeling right now, number 14? 5 of spades, 5 of spades.
Oh, there you go, 5 of spades, there you go.
What are you feeling, sir? spades, four spades. What is it?
Spades, I think it's tennis clubs.
What's your symptoms, sir? What are you feeling, number 14? Four of spades, four of spades. What's your symptoms, sir?
This is poor guy.
Four of spades right now. What did you do to start this aircraft?
Alright, and Airman is going to start talking. She's unintelligible, someone repeats.
What code is that, sir? This is four of spades. What did you do to start this aircraft? Four of spades right now. Can you go right to the regulator, sir? Sure.
They're asking him to turn his oxygen up because they want him to put his...
What would you do if you were feeling like this in the aircraft?
What would you do if you're feeling
What would you do right now, sir, if you was in the aircraft? 14, sir. What would you do with the regulator? Regulator, so give it a pass. Sir, regulate the regulator. Go ahead and game load your regulator, sir.
Gang load the regulator means go full oxygen and put that mask on. He's still working on that.
Gang load your regulator. Gang load gonna crash and die.
Here, man.
Gang load your regulator. 14, sir. Go ahead and gang load. 14, sir. No, you don't gang load. You're gonna die.
Watch this, watch. He's back. He's back in the room.
Watch what he does now.
Are you sure that's not the oxygen got right back into his system. The ATP got all needed for his breathing.
Okay, so you can stop now.
You're the man. It's like, so the problem is that idiot light is on, and the only person who can't see it is the person who's got the idiot light on. Yeah. It totally sneaks up on you, and unless you have some sort of way for you to know.
You wouldn't.
And everybody's symptoms are different. Pete, they did that training at Leesburg.
Let's talk about it.
So Pete, do you fly with the
When we
pulse
did that,
oximeter?
they gave us a card
I do.
that had all the instruments on it, and you were supposed to write down.
All right, story time. Yeah, remember when I started this off? I'm a real idiot. All right, so let's do it in the FAA model of how we talk about scenario-based training, and they do it with what's called a PAVE model. And the PAVE model gives a framework for describing stories and how you would act in this situation. So here's what happened to me back in 2006. I was 35 to be in my 30s again. And this is when I had LS4, a single seat, 15 meter standard class, and the environment was a typical wave day. And external factors, I was trying to get a gold altitude, and because we were cheapskates, we didn't have an oxygen system yet. So we bought one in 2007. So this was 2006. So young Pete wants to get his gold badge really badly, but he never got around to getting an oxygen system installed in Juliet Sierra. Pete spent a long time at 10,000 feet in a weak wave, and eventually near Luray, Pete connected with the wave that took him over 12,500 feet. Now Pete knew his regulations because he was an instructor, and he knew that the regs that you get 30 minutes between 12,500 and 14,000 feet. And because of where I released in my low point, I needed to get to 13,800 feet. So I didn't have a wristwatch back in those days, but I do have a flight computer that tells me how long the flight has lasted. I don't have like a stopwatch that we can work with, but the flight computer can say you've been airborne for 2 hours and 18 minutes. Remember, most of that time was around 10,000 feet after 2. So Pete climbs through 12,000 feet, 12,500 feet, and he's allowed 30 minutes before the mandatory return to 12,500. So 30 minutes plus 18. So 30 plus 18. So you can't even do it on the ground. So 30 plus 18. What is that? 4 spades. 4 spades. Yeah. I didn't really realize this until after the flight was over. And then I said, that's probably not the smartest thing. Was it within the regulations? Yes. Was I in violation of the FAA regs? No. So, is this reg good enough for me? Maybe my minimum altitude with oxygen should be a little bit lower than that 12,500. And that was when I made a change to how I'm going to approach hypoxia and altitude for me. So my new personal rule is not a foot above 10,000 feet without a working oxygen system. And that's not an FAA rule, that's my personal limit, because I know that I don't have enough brain cells to spare to work with a hypoxic brain. I do that four-space thing pretty quickly, and arithmetic is apparently my first thing to go. I know that other pilots say I get a tingling in my fingers, I get a tingling in my toes, I lose color vision. Everybody operates a little bit differently. Apparently, if you gave me math problems, I'm not so good at sea level. Definitely not good at 10,000. So maybe you can handle the altitude, but I've been running 1,000 miles a year at a resting heart rate of 54, and I can still feel the effect of 10,000 feet. So apparently, your athletic prowess has very little to do with this. In fact, Hugh was telling me when he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro a long time ago, one of the very famous athletes, Martina Navratilova, a tennis player, she also climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and she just couldn't handle the altitude at all, and they took her down off the mountain. She couldn't climb to the top of it. So apparently athletic prowess doesn't have as much to do with altitude, ability to operate at higher altitudes as you might think. Let's look at that invulnerability in macho again. Like, I run, I'm a smart guy, I do strong weightlifting exercises, I'm in good shape, I don't have a pot belly. Like, those things don't matter at all for hypoxia. We saw that Air Force guy in the hypobaric chamber. He was in much better shape than I am, and he suffered from that hypoxia pretty badly. It doesn't matter how much muscle you have on your body, it matters how much oxygen is in your system. Apparently there's some type of gene which has shown up in the populations of the Inca and the Tibetans and the Nepali, where they can handle the high altitudes better because that's how they've been doing it their whole lives. But you guys live at sea level, you're not going to be able to do this. You should be wearing oxygen. Maybe you should consider your personal minimums for going up to altitude as well. I don't think of oxygen as a cute accessory. I think of it as a life support system, because the glider is flying because of stuff that I'm doing to it, and if the most important component of the glider is not working, that's the brain of the pilot who's doing the flying, then that is no good. So keep that oxygen flowing. Oxygen early. Oh, it turns out that the FAA is a little bit of an outlier in terms of the regulation. So in Europe, the regulation is different, and the regulation is different for sailplane pilots than it is for airplane pilots. So I found this reg in the EASA rig. There's a QR code for it down there if you want to go find it and prove me wrong or not. But in the section that talks about glider flight, they have altitude limits that are different for glider pilots than they do for airplane pilots, because apparently airplane pilots aren't using that much brain as glider pilots. All airplane pilots do at that altitude is autopilot and do this dial and do that knob. They have the same for airplane pilots, but they have a lower number for glider pilots. And the reason they have a lower number for glider pilots is because with frightening regularity, there would be pilots flying in France right next to Mont Blanc, and there will be a glider smashing into the side of Mont Blanc with frightening regularity. It turns out that it's really hard for you to fly at those altitudes without oxygen, and a very mentally demanding part of flying right next to a mountain, and so they lowered the number down to 10,000 feet chain.
It doesn't say you have to use it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, you just have, like our passengers above 15.
So basic. Liz, they're
Probably
right.
more of like,
Yeah, but Shane, if it's equipped,
If you have an accident and you weren't wearing the oxygen, you had this reg, yeah. It's a different world over there. So, there's three parts. We're almost there. Oxygen systems, like I've become a big believer in oxygen. Like I've said before, like it doesn't matter how good or how fit you are, unless you have a Tibetan ancestry or a Nepali ancestry or an Inca ancestry, I consider you guys probably just as vulnerable to hypoxia as I am. And I would really love to see people start using oxygen when they're doing wave flying. And I really don't think that the oxygen system should be just thought of as an accessory. They are absolutely a life support system. So you get a cannula and you get a face mask. You're required to wear a face mask above 18,000 feet. And that's because the Mountain High tells you have to. Part 91 in the FAA regs does not say anything to that effect. But if manufacturer recommendation tells you you have to follow the rules of the manufacturer recommendations for flight above 18,000. So I shaved my beard the first time in 11 years. This is 10 days worth of growth. Thank you. The system has the EDS oxymizer, which takes oxygen in the little red tube here and out the little blue tube here. And you gotta have fresh batteries in it. The difference here is they use alkaline batteries. I only use lithium batteries for mine, because alkaline batteries will corrode when they pop. I check the batteries out all the time. So the book that I referenced at the beginning, The Dancing with the Wave, the author had come up with an experiment where he took a whole bunch of people in an airplane at high altitude. He all had pulse oximeters on everybody, and he observed them for the time that they climbed to altitude. And the pilots that had these type of cannulas, the flare tip cannulas, had much better oxygen saturation than the ones with the stylish small standard tip. So if you're going to be shopping for an oxygen system, you should spring for the big ones. The big ones that really cover up the nostril really well. Or if you have no fashion sense whatsoever, you can get one of these oxymizers. You will not catch me dead wearing this stylish. This is for one of the systems that doesn't, if you're on a budget and you want to have oxygen anyway, you can have the oxygen always on. And this little reservoir here, when you exhale a little bit of that oxygen, when you're exhaling, there's always a little bit of oxygen that didn't get absorbed into your bloodstream. So each time you exhale, you're actually blowing out a little bit of oxygen as well. And this little reservoir here takes that oxygen and makes it available for the next puff. But like I said, I'm way too vain to wear something like that. Holy mackerel, that is the end. So thank you very much. And questions?
If I'm remembering the ops manual properly, the club rule says, yes, absolutely, oxygen above 12,500 feet. Do you think we should reevaluate that?
I wondered if I should bring that up to the board. My number is 10,000. That's my number. Other people may be better, but I feel really vulnerable and stupid about 10,000 without oxygen. And I've had plenty of flights where, we'll just leave the oxygen on the ground. It's overcast. We're not going to. I got to wave, man. It was like, yeah. So like, if you have a privately owned glider, man, get yourself an oxygen system. So this Shenandoah Valley is fantastic for wave exploration, and my best flights of the year have all been waves. And you should have a system that can handle that. And you should not be macho about it. Oh, I don't need oxygen. Please don't do that. Get an oxygen system.
But most of us don't have the lift buttons you and Shane do.
That's right. Bob?
Yeah, so does the club require pulse oximeter?
Nope.
No.
Nope. The pulse oximeter fits on your finger, and it tells you if you have enough oxygen molecules in your hemoglobin, and it does it as a percentage basis. So if it gets down to a certain point, you're going to be passing out, or you're going to be extra stupid. Yeah, Evan.
What's the 30 minutes between 12:05 and 14?
Yeah.
What's your interpretation?
Why do we have that rule? It's fascinating. Okay.
No, but if I'm between 12:05 and 14,
yeah,
29 minutes.
Yeah.
I go back down under 12:05.
You have to be under 12.5 at that 29th and a half.
Then it resets.
And then does it reset?
My opinion is that no. My opinion is no. There are people that say it's yes. After reading the regs with the interpretation beforehand, you can read it however you want. It's kind of like, whatever.
Doesn't seem like
you want to read. It feels ambiguous to me. I would err on the don't. It doesn't reset. Yeah. But I'm not a lawyer, so
Yeah, probably resets.
Get oxygen. You shouldn't be flying that high without oxygen.
Definitely safe.
It resets about 4 hours later.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? And I appreciate your not booing me off the stage.
Good job.
Thank you.